Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into a beer from Russian River Brewing Company. I did get this one as part of that big Russian River kind of sampler pack from Craft Shack. Today's beer in question is called Sanctification. It is a blonde ale that clocks in at 4.75% ABV, and this one was also brewed with brettanomyces. So I've had a few of their standard beers that they just added brettanomyces, so I'm expecting this to be a sour version of a standard blonde ale. Russian River, of course, based in Santa Rosa, California. So, looking at label art, just a very clean design. Again, not exactly sure what that is. Looks like some kind of hand tool axe of sorts. But whatever it is, kind of neat, plain Jane. This, of course, just as with the last brettanomyces beers, has the cage and a cork. So I've just got a little towel here. I'm going to scoop that glass to the edge just for a minute. Give me a grip on the cork. Popped right off. All right. And we are using our nice Delirium glass. I love this goblet for sours. It does a great job. Really good glass for it. And this does have yeast in the bottle for secondary fermentation, so I'm going to go gently here because I don't want to start pouring a bunch of yeast out into the glass. So, visually, yep, that looks like a blonde ale. Reasonably active in terms of carbonation. It's super, super fine, kind of champagne-like. Obviously, a normal blonde ale, you would get a nice head on here. This with the brettanomyces and it being a sour. You know, it is what it is. I wanted to pour it gently, so I'm sure that this would have formed a normal blonde ale head. The fact it has added brettanomyces is just kind of their twist on what they did with the style, but I wanted to avoid getting any of that yeast sediment that's settled in the bottom of the bottle into the glass. So job well done. It's nice and clear. So head and retention, I'm just going to give credit where credit's due. I would assume that it would pour like a standard blonde ale head. But regardless, we can get right up over this and get some information out of the beer. Oh yeah. Really, really smells strongly of brettanomyces. So brettanomyces is a very interesting organism. It can impart myriad aromas and flavors. In the case of this beer, and like another one or two of their Russian River added brettanomyces beers, it gives me this very strong kind of tutti fruity aroma off of it, which, you know, kind of passion fruit, strawberries, berries, banana. It's kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of different fruit. That's the aroma I'm getting off of this. It smells fantastic, but you can also distinctly smell that there is some tart and sour on the nose. It does make itself known to the nose on the aroma. It smells really, really nice, regardless. So brettanomyces, you can often get these funky kind of barnyardy, you know, hay, some people say gym towel kind of aromas and sometimes flavors. In this case, it smells fantastic. Just a light little sour tart, pungency on the nose, as well as this tutti frutti aroma. It smells great, looks great. Let's just jump right in and see what it's about. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so, yep, definitely brettanomyces makes itself quite known. Before we even get into the flavor profile, let's talk about the body and let's talk about the mouthfeel. 4.75% ABV on a blonde ale, kind of on the lower end of average. It's not a super heavy beer style in general. This does not feel heavy at all. I would say this is a light-bodied beer. It maybe even feels a little bit lighter than your average blonde ale, but it feels appropriate for the ABV range. In terms of the mouthfeel, this one, you can feel a little bit of resistance there, but it feels appropriate for the ABV, though it's worth noting that this one does get quite creamy as you agitate on the palate. So weight and mouthfeel-wise, a little bit of a deviation from the norm, but for the ABV range, it's pretty close to what I expected. In terms of the flavor profile, the brettanomyces on this beer does a quick, sharp little kick of sour and tart, but it's not super intense. It's relatively subtle on this one, and then it dials back and then it starts to open up the underlying flavors of the base beer itself. Now, on this blonde ale, this is one that You know, typically it's not a heavily hopped style anyway. There is a little bit of bitters on the front, so clearly they still added some hops in here to balance out the finished product. But what is of note to me is that it comes through with this very grain-like, kind of doughy, crackery flavor to the underlying malt bill. That is relatively common in a blonde ale, though you will typically also get some more kind of roasty, caramelized edge. And we're not talking like an amber ale, but you'll get some more deeply caramelized malts into the malt bill as well that adds just a bit more of a richness to the flavor profile. This one tastes very grain-like and very kind of doughy and crackery, which, you know, on a 4.75 with a sour back, I think is probably a good call. Whatever malt bill they selected to put this together, it definitely works in this beer. So I'm going to jump back in, second sip. We're going to let everything re-intensify. Then I'm going to make sure I didn't miss anything, and we'll talk about the balance and the finish. But on first sip, a very, very nice beer. Take two. Little punch of sour and tart. Pulls back within about 3 seconds. Starts to open up the underlying malt bill. Very doughy, very crackery, very bready. Crumb, think toast. It's that kind of malt bill. It's not dissimilar to what you might find, say, in a Berliner Weisse or a Gose backbone. It's very nice, which is a really nice complement to this lower ABV and the fact that they added the brettanomyces in there. I think it pairs well and makes for a really nice cohesive beer. There is definitely still like a bit of that classic blonde ale, slightly more caramelized malt in there, but it definitely leads with more that puts me in mind of, say, like a Gose or a Berliner. That's definitely the stronger sensation I'm getting out of it, but it is quite nice. And again, bitters are there, but they're subtle. This having added brettanomyces does make a noticeable dryness on the palate. It's not astringent, but you definitely notice. Typically a blonde ale is going to be pretty clean, but it's going to be pretty round and wet all the way to the end. This one, there's definitely a noticeable drying effect. The other thing I can say on this beer, and this could be partly related to the drying, it could be the brettanomyces, but the finish on this is quite a bit longer than your average blonde ale would be. What's happening on the finish is the palate is getting dried out, and you can still taste these kind of underlying crackery, crummy kind of accents out of the malt bill. But the other thing that's happening is those bitters that are pretty subtle up front, after the other flavors dial back, they become very, very prevalent. Now, it's not an intensity of bitter. I would say perception-wise, it's seeming like 15, 20-ish IBUs, somewhere in that range. But once those other flavors kind of dial back, it just pops off and it lingers on the back of the palate. So there's these lingering, non-intense bitters that actually last a really, really long time. It's very interesting, and I'm quite impressed by it. You don't normally get that even on a standard blonde ale. I certainly wouldn't have expected it in this one with brettanomyces, but it's absolutely there. So yeah, a nice dryness factor and just lingering bitters. It's not hauntingly intense bitters, but they're there and they last quite a long time, well in excess of a minute after each sip. So a very, very long finish. I did not expect that. Overall, the balance on this beer, I think they did a great job. The malt bill they selected, very, very nice. It really works with this beer. The brettanomyces is a nice touch. I think it pairs well with what they put together here. And this is not a super complicated beer style. It's not a super complicated beer, but it has been executed very, very well indeed here. Guys, my impression is another good beer from Russian River. I'm going to take my time, sip on this one, count my scores. When we come back, we will get this beer ranked from top to bottom. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was Russian River Brewing Company's Sanctification, a blonde ale brewed with brettanomyces. This one clocked in at 4.75% ABV. Russian River based in Santa Rosa, California. So yeah, this was a really good beer, guys. This was another winner out of that sampler pack I got from Craft Shack. They still have them up all the time. If you, like me, live somewhere where Russian River, there was no distributor, Craft Shack has got your back. Check them out. They're always popping up new Russian River beers. But what I wanted to say about this was I wasn't really sure what to expect with this beer. You know, a blonde ale paired with brettanomyces. I kind of had an idea from the other kind of normal standard beer where they added brettanomyces that I've tried out of this sampler, but this was another really, really good one. In general, it kind of made its own thing out of the style, but all of the underlying base trait characteristics of the style were present and accounted for. So I really, really liked how this beer turned out, and you know, it was a really nice one. People that are afraid of brettanomyces, you know, I totally get it. But this was one of those that was very, very mild, no funky off flavors, not quite as intense of kind of the lingering back flavor of brettanomyces. So this might be a more approachable sour style that's got brettanomyces in it to try to get you acquainted with it, see if it's up your alley. Regardless, we're going to jump right into the scores. So this beer did exceptionally well across the board. Indeed, only a single category that did not get a perfect score, and that was the body. The body on this was fine, you know, for what it was, but for the ABV range, it was really just kind of average. You know, a blonde ale is not typically a super heavy style, but this was properly light. It does have a lower ABV, but it's only 0.25% off of 5. I expected a little bit more breadth, but it is what it is. It didn't detract from the beer drinking experience, just kind of average for the ABV range. I did give the body a 5 out of 10, which does, of course, leave a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 9 categories. That's aroma, taste, mouthfeel, finish, head and retention, appearance, balance, feeling/intangible, my subjective thoughts category, and example of style. So the total score on Russian River Brewing Company's Sanctification is a 95. Guys, a really, really great beer here. I have enjoyed all of these Russian River beers that I've had thus far. I absolutely am going to be getting some more of them to review and some more to just set on the side for my own drinking pleasure. But I'm really, really glad that I found an avenue to get these in my hands living in the Southeast. Absolutely monster brewer here. I've tried a lot of their different styles of beer. They're not a one-trick pony. They're really brewing very, very good beers here, guys. If you haven't checked them out yet, I do recommend it. Check out Craft Shack. They'll be able to hook you up with exactly what you're trying to find. Folks, that is today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just toggle on your notifications, hit that bell icon. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.